And Herbalife CEO, Michael Johnson, has an interesting way of deflecting that whole pyramid scheme question.
I go back to any company. I started in Disney as a director, and then I went to be executive vice president and then president of the international entity of the company. So I moved up 6 or 7 levels. And at the top was sitting the CEO of the company, Michael Eisner. Is that a pyramid? Is that any different than what we're doing here?
Yes! It is completely different. Disney was a corporate ladder. Those were all salaried positions with benefits. The company wasn't banking on you personally filling your garage with cases of unsold DVDs of The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. But Johnson could have made a stronger non-pyramid case in that interview if he could have just shown how much money distributors get from selling product to actual retail customers. But conveniently, Herbalife didn't keep records of those figures. Now, unfortunately for them, the FTC recently finished a multi-year investigation into the company and filed a blistering complaint, walking right up to the line of outright calling it a pyramid scheme. They alleged Herbalife's compensation program doesn't incentivize retail sales, but rather the recruiting of additional participants who fuel the enterprise by making wholesale purchases of product, which sounds like, you know, how pyramid schemes work. And when people pointed this out, the FTC chair made an amazing statement.
It sounds like what you're saying is that this company had all the hallmarks of a pyramid scheme, isn't that right?
Our focus isn't on the label. The word pyramid does not appear in our complaint. That is true. They were not determined not to have been a pyramid.
Think about what she just said there. Not determined not to be a pyramid. How is that not a huge warning sign? If the FDA announced, we have not determined cotton candy not to be clown pubes, you would never risk eating that shit ever again. Now, who knows why the FTC stopped short? Perhaps it ensured Herbalife agreed to a settlement in which they neither admitted nor denied wrongdoing, but did pay $200 million and agreed to significant new changes. But the contents of this complaint are mind-blowing. The FTC claims that the overwhelming majority of Herbalife distributors who pursue the business opportunity make little or no money, and a substantial percentage lose money. In fact, the FTC even stated Herbalife is going to have to start operating legitimately, which implies they hadn't been up till then. And yet, amazingly, Michael Johnson characterized this as a victory.
Hey, we've got great news. We've reached an agreement with the U.S. Federal Trade Commission that ensures that our mission to improve people's lives will continue to thrive. I have to tell you, this is really good news, and it comes at a time when our business is growing bigger and better than ever before.
Oh, f*** you. He didn't just polish that turd. He put it in a bottle and convinced people that they could make a fortune selling nutritional turds in their spare time. But look, whether Herbalife is a pyramid, not a pyramid, or not a pyramid, it is true that Herbalife is growing. And a lot of that growth has come from Latino communities where Herbalife has been aggressively expanding for years. They even bought a sponsorship on the hit telenovela La Fea Más Bella. It's very subtle. Just see if you can spot it.
Mira, look, it's called Herbalife. This is going to help you have more energy, and it's also going to help you face all the problems you have. Believe me.
Really?
I drink it every day, and besides, it's delicious.
If that is happening on the show, I can't imagine the real drama happening in the commercials. Mr. Geico Lizard, I want to save 15% on car insurance, but how can I when you are sleeping with my wife? And the fact a large percentage of Herbalife's business comes from Latinos is a point of pride for Michael Johnson.
We call it the Herbalife family, and we're not ashamed of that. We're very proud of that. The Latino, the blood, if you will, it's in this company, and it feels great.
Oh, I love the blood of the Latino community. I just want to bathe in it. I want to bathe in your blood, Latinos. How's this sales pitch going? I feel like it's going bueno. But to those supplying that Latino blood, it can feel less than great, as this community meeting of those who feel burned by Herbalife shows.
Este negocio llegué a perder la cantidad de $22,000.
En 9 meses yo perdí $16,000.
Her husband continuously reminds her about the $8,000 that she owes to them.
El producto se vence. So, si no te decidas, tratabas de venderlo por lo que tú lo compraste, es una gran pérdida. Ella sabía que yo no tenía ese dinero. Y ella está viendo, y le digo, siendo una amiga mía. Y yo dije, cuando le dije, oye, ¿qué pasó? Le dije, yo no le veo ninguna ganancia. Y dijo, tú tienes que meter a gente abajo de ti para que tú puedas ver una ganancia. Y le dije, ¿sabes qué? Ahí es donde tú te equivocaste y yo no voy a estafar a nadie más. So, yo perdí, pero nadie más va a perder por mí.
You know what? Now might be a good time to point out, when someone says their blood is in me and it feels great, that is what a f***ing vampire says. And friends of yours may say, well, that's just Herbalife. My MLM is different. But there are echoes of what you've seen across this industry. For instance, Herbalife is far from the only company that has made bold product claims regarding health.
When I started, my body fat was 37.5, and now it's right around 16, 17. The pain and the lethargy that go along with fibromyalgia is gone.
3 days into the experience, I was feeling like 25 years younger.
When I found out they had a pet formulation of liquid biocell, that's when I knew I had something very exclusive. After putting Rembrandt on liquid biocell pet for 3 months, he started walking again.
Okay, first of all, obviously, good boy Rembrandt. But second, are you sure he didn't just summon the energy to walk because he was desperate to get away from the eyedropper of liquid nonsense you were shoving in your pets' mouths? And just like Herbalife, MLMs can often have Scientology-like levels for you to ascend through. With USANA, you may have gone from sharer to believer to builder to achiever and beyond. And at Kiani, you pass through a series of ranks with the names of gemstones, as one distributor explained at a company conference.
I want to talk about a millionaire mindset. Because if you got involved in Kiani to become a jade, you're selling yourself short. If you got involved in Kiani to become a diamond, you're not thinking big enough yet. If you haven't already visualized yourself at double black diamonds, you need to kick yourself in the rear.
Now, double black diamond is technically a skiing term for particularly dangerous slopes. And I'm thinking maybe you shouldn't choose a term that basically says, if you even try this, you'll go downhill fast and may end up in a fucking ditch. And the garage qualified issue is not exclusive to Herbalife either. It's come up with multiple other MLMs, including Mary Kay.
I saw with my own 2 eyes the warehousing of the product, meaning they had basements full of it, or closets full of it, or garages full of it.
Take a look at this. Inventory from a consultant who is leaving the company. She agreed to show us boxes of product she said she bought to keep her status.
Wow. So it seems some distributors may have been more customer than salesperson. That's like finding out Jamie Lee Curtis was actually the one eating all the Activia. I eat 146 containers a day and I shit like a machine gun. And Mary Kay and Herbalife will tell you that stockpiling is uncommon and you can return unsold products for a refund. But you should know those refunds can be partial or may involve resigning. The point is, MLMs may present themselves as a great opportunity, but your chance of success is actually remote. Just look at the income disclosure statements. Kiani's shows that just under 40% of active distributors received a check for $10 or more, meaning that most didn't even make that. And Nu Skin's says around 18% of active distributors earned commission checks, which is actually worse than it sounds because active distributors represent only around 36% of total distributors. So if you do the math, which they conveniently didn't, that would mean that 93% of all Nu Skin distributors receive 0 commissions from the company in an average month. So even if you have never heard of Nu Skin before, it may be paying you just as much as it does 93% of all its distributors. Now, MLMs will insist those percentages are misleading. They will tell you that many of their distributors aren't even in the business to make money. They just went to all that trouble of signing up to get discounts on their amazing rhino ejaculate, or as they call it, soup. They'll say individual distributors distributors like that Vima guy and those Herbalife reps don't speak for them, and that their claims are against company policies and violators get disciplined. And most importantly, they will all insist they are not pyramids. And no one claims that in a more spectacular manner than J.R. Reidinger, who has an airtight case based on spelling the word pyramid backwards.
We're actually the anti-pyramid, the reverse pyramid, the Demerite. We are in a Demerite!
He sounds like a cult leader about to demand his followers drink poison. And it frankly doesn't help that he looks like Jim Jones to a genuinely creepy degree. But it is hard for the FTC to investigate these companies. The industry is large and opaque, and pursuing a case is a long, arduous process. They've only brought around 24 pyramid scheme cases against MLMs in the last 4 decades. And MLMs have surprising lobbying strength. There's actually a direct selling caucus in Congress with more than 40 bipartisan members, including Jason Chaffetz, who worked at Nu Skin for more than a decade. As for Herbalife, it has gone to remarkable lengths to protect its name in Washington. It's recruited 2 former top FTC officials to work for the company, and it's willing to be incredibly petty as well. Because remember that clip of Herbalife victims? That is from an upcoming documentary called Betting on Zero. And when it played at a DC film festival earlier this year, the screening had 173 empty seats because an Herbalife lobbying firm reportedly bought them out. And that's not just petty, it's stupid. If you don't want people to see a movie, you don't need to buy out seats. Just put up posters saying, starring Shia LaBeouf. Done. Job done. Nobody's there. But even if the government did suddenly decide to crack down on this industry, which seems unlikely, many MLMs have been expanding overseas. Here is a video from India.
We are changing people's lives. You are the brand.
We are growing every day.
Let's march towards 1 million, 1 billion, 1 region.
They are lucky Gandhi isn't alive to hear that song, because it would really test his belief in non-violent protests. You know what? F it. Everybody pick up a rock and meet me at Herbalife headquarters. That song was unforgivable. Just look online and you can find videos of gigantic Herbalife events around the world. Here is one in South Africa. Here is one in Mongolia. Here's one in Venezuela. Here's one in Malaysia. And here is Michael Johnson in Mexico doing this. Okay, I don't say this lightly, but that is douchebaggery at a double black diamond level. So the point is, what can we do? Because good, hard-working people are going to keep getting caught up in these companies. There has to be a way to tell the world about the dangers of MLMs. And I think I might know the perfect distribution network. And that is why tonight, we are starting our own pyramid scheme. Hashtag, this is a pyramid scheme. Because if someone you know is thinking about joining an MLM, this is a huge opportunity. And let me show you how it works. I want to tell you about a fantastic product for you to share with friends and family. The product is this entire video about why MLMs are f***ing awful. Let me break it down for you. By sharing this, you can be an independent distributor for a leading web video about the dangers of MLMs. You can do this full-time or part-time and give your family the lifestyle they deserve, which is frankly not getting caught up in this bullshit. You need scientific proof that it works? We told a dog we were going to produce this video, and look, the dog is walking now. Was it able to walk before? Sorry, we don't keep those records. Here is how it works. Simply watch this video and then forward it to 5 people. And then instruct them to send it to another 5 people, and so on, and so on, and so on. Within 14 cycles, every single person on Earth will have seen this, to the point that we will need to start f***ing to create more people to watch it. Also, if every single person on Earth is watching this video, hello, Beyonce. I'm a really big fan. And like MLMs, we would like to direct a message to Latinos in particular. So we will be uploading 2 versions of this segment to YouTube, with one in Spanish. But because I do not speak Spanish, it will be subtitled, and this portion will be performed by Jaime Camille from Jane the Virgin. Hola, hola Jaime.
Hola Juan.
Hola.
¿Cómo estás?
You are clearly a more attractive version of me in every way, aren't you, Jaime?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I am.
So please share this video to stop people getting involved with these schemes, because MLMs are hurting people and we need to spread the word about their dangers. Send this to 20 people.
30 people. 100 people.
What are you waiting for? This system will work, and it is not a dimmer ripe. It's an anti-dimmer ripe. This is a pyramid, right?
Right! This is a pyramid!
We are in a pyramid! That's our show! Share this video! We'll see you next week. Good night! Hi there, Internet. I'm John Oliver, host of Last Week Tonight, a show that you probably watch on YouTube for free, although maybe free isn't quite the right word, because even on YouTube you do have to look at this, meaning you are, in a very real sense, paying a price. Now, we're still on hiatus at the moment, but we're going to come back for a minute to give you a quick update on something we mentioned last season, and it concerns Pringles. You know, the product that looked at potato chips and inexplicably thought, what about that, but worse, and delivered via tube. You may remember that towards the end of the year, I played a clip of Don Lemon pestering a man with questions about when election results would come in that he didn't have the answer to. And I responded like this: leave the man alone! At that point, it would have been just as productive to ask him, when will penguins learn how to fly? Or when is Michael Keaton going to win an Oscar? Or what does the rest of the Pringle guy's body look like? Is he tall or short? Does he have a lot of body hair? Or is he completely smooth? When will you be able to tell me what his nipples look like? Are you talking hours or are you talking days? Now, that was a perfectly fine joke there, because there is a lot that we don't know about the Pringles guy. In fact, the only thing we do know is that his head looks like a hard-boiled egg disguised as Tom Selleck. And I honestly didn't really think much about that joke again, but it seems that a lot of you did. Because after our show aired, people went out of their way to either draw or find drawings of what people feel the Pringles guy does look like from the neck down. And at the end of such a depressing, isolating year, it was genuinely uplifting to see. Because you tweeted a variety of illuminating drawings, like this one, captioned Mr. Pringles nipple reveal, which seems to have combined the head of Mr. Pringles with the body of Baymax from Big Hero 6 with nipples and the belly button drawn on. Also, the shorts of a sexual predator. Then, there was this depiction of a portly Mr. Pringles sporting a bow tie and some thriving armpit hair, a look that just screams unemployed Chippendale. And there was an artist who sent us not one, not two, but 3 excellent renderings of a body-positive Mr. Pringle, none of which were produced for us, by the way. As his caption notes, I've dedicated the last several years to studying his anatomy. But time well spent. I will say this, he single, he Pringle, he ready to mingle. If that is not Pringles' new slogan, they're exactly as bad a company as I imagine they are. Now, a few of you knew exactly what they were talking about, like this one, captioned, this picture of the Pringles man is canon, which is simply excellent. Others went in a different direction, like this slender man, Mr. Pringles, or this one envisioning him as a hermit crab, or this spectacular piece portraying him as an octopus. Honestly, the whole response has been absolutely fantastic. The only thing that doesn't sit well with me is just how silent Pringles has been on this matter, because it's not that they don't maintain an active Twitter presence. They've tweeted before, if we named Pringles the same way football got its name, Pringles would be known as Mouth Crisp. They've also tweeted, mixed breed puppies are like the flavour stack of puppies, which actually feels offensive. I'm just not entirely sure why. But still, no answer to our very basic question. And I know that they respond to people online because I've seen it. Once, someone tweeted at them, your sour cream and onion chips taste a bit like throw up, but still they are my favourite. Is this a problem? To which Pringles responded immediately with, please send us a DM with your contact information so we can get this handled. The thing is, that person wasn't even complaining. They weren't looking for a refund or free chips. They wanted an answer, and the reason I know that is because they shot back, I was just wondering if that is a problem. And all of that makes me wonder even more, why is Pringles dodging our question here? We're truly not asking for a lot. We've seen a ton of excellent Pringles bods. We just need to know which one is canon. Is it Hermit Pring? Is it this Hot Daddy Pring? I'd prefer if it was the second one. I just need to know the truth. Because I know so many other pointless facts about Pringles. I know that their mascot's official name is Julius Pringles, and I know that the guy who came up with the Pringles tube was so proud of his design that when he died he had his ashes put in a Pringles can and buried, which is a choice. I also know that Pringles calls its product a crisp for a reason, and that is that they don't meet the FDA's definition of a potato chip, which is pretty wild. How janky does your product need to be not to meet that basic definition? My point here is, I know so much useless information about Pringles, but not the one thing that I really want to know, which is, what is Julius Pringles working with from the neck down? Do I need to know this? No, I don't. Do I want to? Yes, very badly. So much so that I'm willing to give $10,000 to Feeding America if Pringles answers my question, on the condition, of course, that they don't spend a fucking penny of that money on Pringles, because it's a garbage snack. It's garbage. The ball is in your court, guys. The choice is yours. Do the right Pring here. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back in February. Until then, please stay safe. Goodbye. Hi there, Internet. I'm John Oliver, host of Last Week Tonight. Now, we are off at the moment, but as it's holiday season, I'd actually like to talk to you about something that may be about to happen where you live, and that is SantaCon. It's the manufactured event that I believe is short for Santa Condoleezza Rice. She deserves a better legacy than that. Not a lot better, to be honest, but slightly better. Now, if you do not know what SantaCon is, first of all, congratulations, but I'm afraid that your innocence is about to be shattered. SantaCon is essentially a day-long pub crawl organised in various cities where thousands of people can dress up as Santa and get hammered. Now, however fun and whimsical it may sound, it isn't. It is not that. Just listen to this man, and bear in mind, he's talking about Santas here.
They act very crazy, ridiculous. They drink, and they get drunk, and they behave terrible.
Too much alcohol has led to fights and a lot of complaints about crude and lewd behavior.
Yeah, that is what SantaCon is. It's not a magical occasion. It's a terrifying combination of binge drinking, public urination, and trauma to small children that decades of therapy will never manage to reverse. Here is how bad it is. Last year, there were 14 people arrested and 4 officers injured during SantaCon in Hoboken, New Jersey alone. Just think about that. Arrested doing SantaCon in Hoboken, New Jersey. That might be literally the saddest sentence in existence. It is way worse than for sale baby shoes never worn. Because at least that baby was just dead and not arrested in a Santa outfit in, I repeat, Hoboken, New Jersey. And you need to know, it's not just violence.
I was in Duane Reade on 14th and 3rd. Aisle 4, I'll never forget. I saw an explicit sex act in the aisle. 2 Santas going at it.
Look, I'm truly sorry that you saw that. And look, not to victim blame here, but you were in aisle 4, the most erotic of the Duane Reade aisles. That's canned goods and baby care, powders and chowders, and an exotic fuck palace devoted to the pleasures of the flesh. Everybody knows that. Aisle 4 for life, son. Now, I should mention, SantaCon does have a bright side in that many local SantaCons donate to charity. In New York City, participants can even buy a ticket that is tax deductible, which might be literally the most humiliating tax deduction after a contribution to the Church of Scientology. Where's Shelley, David? Where is she? Where's Shelley? And look, nearly any charitable donation is good, but I will point out, according to the website for New York SantaCon, the amount raised over the past 9 years is $450,000, which sounds like a lot. Yes, still, you realise that works out to around $50,000 a year from an event that reportedly attracts around 20,000 participants. Meaning, if you do some rough math, they're raising just over $1.60 per person, which is about as much as you could raise just by collecting the spare change that falls out of the pockets of all the Santas fucking each other in the middle of Duane Reade's. It happens! This year is actually the 21st anniversary of New York SantaCon. Ironically, it's technically old enough to drink now. And I would argue that this SantaCon should probably be the last, because the magic of Christmas should simply not include having to watch Santa finger blasting an elf in a Wells Fargo ATM vestibule at 10:45 a.m. And I'm not alone here. Even the people who started SantaCon are now sick of it. In 2014, some of the original organisers staged a funeral for SantaCon at the same time as the event. It is time to put an end to this madness that is about to befall us, or to put it in another, perhaps more Christmassy way. 'Twas the night before SantaCon, and all through the city, the bars were preparing for Santas who are shitty. The children were nestled as though nothing was wrong, not knowing tomorrow they'd see Santa's dawn. When what to my wondering eyes should appear but the actual Santa without any beard. He gave me a look and pulled out a stocking to wipe the tears from his eyes and then said something shocking. said, I'm not usually the judgmental type. After all, what do you think I smoke in this bag? But as sure as I am that my red sleigh flies, this should be the year that SantaCon dies. Santa then left and disappeared in the sky with his sleigh full of presents and a gleam in his eye. But I heard him exclaim ere he drove out of sight.
Ho, ho, ho! Fuck SantaCon to all, and to all a good night.
Listen to him. Goodbye, Santa. You heard the man. Thank you so much for watching. We are back next February. Happy holidays. Goodbye. Our main story this week is Scotland. Americans know it as the birthplace of Shrek and that accent you think you can do but actually can't. Well, this coming Thursday, Scotland is facing a major decision.
Scotland will vote this week on whether to leave the United Kingdom.
For the first time in modern history, London could be at risk of losing control of Scotland. It could become its own country.
Yes, it seems like England may lose yet another country. And look, I'm not saying the sun is setting on the British Empire. Let's just say the restaurant of history is switching to its dinner menu. Now, there is a lot to explain here, especially because when most American people think about Scottish independence, they tend to picture this.
They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
Oh yes, nothing screams Scottish freedom quite like a millionaire Australian anti-Semite on horseback. So let me bring you up to date here. Scotland is currently a member of the United Kingdom, which is not a country. It's actually a complicated political and economic union. Think of it as an archipelagic supergroup comprised of 4 variously willing members. And to understand why Scotland may want to leave, you really need to understand the history of its relationship with England.
For centuries, England and Scotland remained separate and frequently at war. But in 1707, they formed a single country, Great Britain, a decision that's been controversial in Scotland ever since.
Oh yeah, I'd say it's still controversial. Given that, as you can see here, we are still role-playing with wooden swords to try and emotionally work through it. So Scotland and England have been involved in something of a 300-year arranged marriage. And look, I will be the first one to acknowledge England has been a little bit of a dick since the honeymoon. In 1746, we actually banned the kilt just because we knew they liked it. And then we chose God Save the King as the UK's national anthem, a song which at one point had a verse referencing rebellious Scots to crush. Although to be fair, we later realised that was wrong and replaced it with a line about pissing on the Welsh. But 2.5 years ago, it was announced that Scotland would finally get to vote on its independence. And since then, there has been a spirited campaign.
There are two campaigns. Yes, Scotland, backed by the SNP and the Scottish Greens, and Better Together.
OK, for a start, Better Together is not a great name for a campaign. It sounds like what people say to convince themselves to stay in a dead marriage. Look, I'm not saying we're good together, Marion. I'm saying we're better together. Tax-wise, it's preferable to the alternative. Why are you crying, Marion? I'm saying something nice. And if you think their name is uninspiring, wait until you hear their slogan.
No thanks. No thanks.
No thanks.
No thanks.
No thanks is a violently British way to refuse something. That is just one step away from, oh, I couldn't possibly. But what's even more interesting is who is helping fund these two campaigns.
Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling wants Scotland to stay part of the UK. Rowling has donated $1.6 million to the Better Together campaign.
Yeah, but that's not really a surprise, is it? She famously wrote a book where a redhead played second fiddle to a magical Englishman. Come along, Ron, come along. I shall have all the powers and your brothers can die fighting my wars. Come along, come along. Meanwhile, the opposing side has received 80% of its funding from these two people.
Jackpot. A Scottish couple scoop £161 million on the lottery, making them Europe's biggest ever winners.
That's right. The pro-independence campaign is predominantly financed by lottery winners. They're like an adorable Scottish version of the Koch brothers. So let's just look at the two arguments. First, the case in favour of Scottish independence.
We can take matters into Scottish hands. No one, absolutely no one, will run the affairs of this country better than the people who live and work in Scotland.
But to be fair, he might be right about that. Scots know how to run a country, because when they got to choose a national animal, they selected, and I swear this is true, a unicorn. Who knew you were allowed to do that? Pick a fictional animal. Yeah. America's probably kicking itself for choosing the bald eagle now, aren't you? You could have picked a Wookiee in a top hat, or whatever the f*** Grimace is. Look. He looks like a magic genie granted a wish to Gorbachev's birthmark. But... And also, for their national flower, the Scots chose a thistle. That is a plant made out of tiny knives and a throwing star. The only flower I like is a flower that could pierce an Englishman's throat. And look, there are legitimate reasons for Scotland to want to govern itself. For instance, it's a predominantly liberal country which has frequently been governed by a conservative UK government. And seldom has that divide been more pronounced than right now, when the UK's Prime Minister is David Cameron.
Cameron's problem is that as a posh Southern Tory, he's seen in Scotland as the personification of everything that's wrong with England and the UK.
Yeah, I agree with that. He embodies all the things I hate most about England, and I'm English. Let me prove this to you. This is a picture of him as a student at Oxford. He's in f***ing tails. Now, Cameron says he's desperately embarrassed by that photo, which is why it pains me so much to be showing it to you. Can we get a close-up on his face? Because that is the face of a man who fast-forwards through the servant parts of Downton Abbey. Just... Who cares what's happening downstairs? Let's just hope the soup doesn't get cold. In fact, let me show you what an arsehole David Cameron is. One of the biggest issues in the independence debate concerns the fact that Scotland has a surprisingly large amount of oil. But watch how David Cameron responded to a simple parliamentary question about who should control revenue from it.
A poll last week showed that 68% of Scots want oil revenues devolved to Scotland. Does the Prime Minister agree with 68% of Scots, or does he not?
If you ask a stupid question, you get a stupid answer, I think.
In Imagine that sound for 300 years, and it gives you some sense of why Scotland may be ready to leave. OK, so let's look at the anti-independence campaign now. Clearly, they had some serious work to do. Unfortunately, their attempts to win hearts and minds involved this controversial commercial targeted at women, featuring a Scottish mother confused by the whole concept of independence, who has just sent her kids off to school.
Best time of the day, this. When they're all out. Nice and quiet. Gives you time to think. Helps you clear your head. Shame it only lasts for 2 minutes. Don't get me wrong. I know how important this vote is. There's not much time left for me to make a decision. But there's only so many hours in the day.
Oh, it's so confusing. It hurts my wee head. I'm just a woman, you know, just a pair of ovaries and some bangs. How do I possibly have the mental capacity to pick from one of 2 options? Put me down for a no and never trust me with an important decision again. What's crazy about this? The crazy thing about this is that the anti-independent side actually has some legitimate arguments to make. Leaving the UK could potentially have some serious consequences for Scotland.
If they vote for independence, Scots have been warned that they risk losing the pound as their currency.
Yeah, they could lose the pound, and that's not nothing. Because if they do, they'd either have to join the currently unstable euro or revert to Scotland's old currency, which I believe was sheep and threats. I'll give you 3 sheep for it and a punch in the face, so we have a f***ing deal! Why do they hate us? And also, while the pro-independence campaign has put a great deal of emphasis on Scotland's oil, there are genuine concerns over how much might actually be left.
Reserves are dwindling. The Office for Budget Responsibility expects the number of barrels produced to decline from 2 million a day in 2012 to just 500,000 in 2040.
And if that's true, that might be a problem. Because if you've ever been there, you will know that solar power is not an option for Scotland. So those are the 2 sides, and with the vote just days away, this thing is set to go down to the wire.
This morning, in shock, Brits woke up to headlines like these. Don't let me be the last Queen of Scotland. Last stand to keep the Union. A new poll for the UK's Sunday Times newspaper shows 51% of Scots plan to vote yes for independence.
And if it comes down to just one vote, we all know who will be called upon to break that tie. Go with your gut, Nessie. You do you, Nessie. You do you. It seems like there is a real chance that Scotland may leave. And if they do, just so you know, there are going to be some significant consequences for everybody.
They might also have to say cheerio to something more symbolic, the beloved Union Jack. You see, the current flag, which hasn't changed in over 200 years, is a mix between England's Cross of St. George, Scotland's Cross of St. Andrew, and Ireland's Cross of St. Patrick.
And the government could ditch the blue and white cross of St. Andrews for something that looks like this.
Oh, great. Great. Well, there goes my fucking bedspread, my shower curtain, my wallpaper, and my dog. Unbelievable. We can't do it. But it is not just flags that are a cause for concern. There is also the small matter of this.
The Scottish National Party wants to get rid of the nuclear weapons that are currently based in Scotland and shift them back to England, and that would be a huge problem for the United Kingdom.
Yeah, that would also be a huge problem for everybody because we have nowhere to keep them right now. I mean, I guess we could disguise them as Buckingham Palace guards, but people are going to notice that after a while. And Scotland wants those weapons gone. Their leaders have described them as, and I quote, an affront to basic decency. And this is coming from the land of the haggis, a boiled sheep stomach stuffed with organ meat. It is no wonder the British government is suddenly panicking. They are scrambling to make nice with Scotland, but here's the problem. When you haven't been nice to someone for 1,000 years, it's very difficult to suddenly start. For instance, last week, they tried raising the Scottish flag over 10 Downing Street. Watch how that went.
On the roof of Downing Street, on the orders of the Prime Minister no less, a moment of high symbolism. Oh dear, and it's not as though everything was going swimmingly before.
That's right. Not even English flagpoles can suddenly start treating Scotland with the respect it deserves. Get this rag off me. Get it off. I can't. Get this blue mess off me. And in a last-ditch effort, David Cameron has even tried, like a romantic hero, to turn up at Scotland's door and plead for them not to leave.
I would be heartbroken if this family of nations that we've put together and that we've done such amazing things together, if this family of nations was torn apart.
That's it? That's the best pleading you've got? There are only 4 days left. Look, if I've learned one thing from the last 4 minutes of British romantic comedies, it's that if you're trying to win someone over, you need a big romantic gesture. A kiss in the rain, a kiss in the snow, turning up to someone's door with romantic signs expressing your love for them because you can't say it out loud because her husband, your best friend, is in the next room, which is a bit f***ed up. But it is effective. It's effective, so with that in mind, let's do this. Because right now, Scotland, I'm just a boy, standing in front of a nation, asking it to continue tolerating me. You want me to show you what I'm willing to do to save this relationship? Here, I will eat some haggis. Look, I'll do it. Oh, yeah. Sheep lungs. There are literally sheep lungs in my mouth. Let me just wash that down with some fine Scottish whiskey. It tastes like a delicious house fire. Look at me, Scotland. I'm drunk on scotch. I'm trying to choke back sheep lung vomit. So kiss me, Scotland. What do you mean this isn't enough? Look, here's your national animal. I'm even pretending to see it. There it is. Hello, unicorn. Hello. And if that's not enough, I'll make the ultimate sacrifice. Oh, yes, that's right. I will feign enjoyment of bagpipe music. The atonal death squeal of your people. I believe this particular song is called Cat Bronchitis in A minor, and I love it. In fact, there's just one problem. It's simply not loud enough. You know what? Oh, no. nuclear waste, the worst type of garbage for raccoons to get into. Now, it's a substance that we all know is dangerous, thanks to movies like this.
They tormented him until he had a horrifying accident and fell into a vat of nuclear waste. Melvin became the Toxic Avenger, the first superhero born out of nuclear waste. His face is so terrifying. We can't show it to you now. You'll have to see the movie for yourself.
Honestly, you really don't need to see the movie, because his face really isn't that terrifying. This is it. I mean, it's bad, but it's so ugly, it's almost cute again. It's like someone melted a candle shaped like a pug. But the point here is, nuclear waste, the radioactive and toxic byproducts from making nuclear energy and weapons, is a serious health hazard, and America has a lot of it.
There are more than 71,000 tons of nuclear waste stranded at the nation's 104 reactors. Put all those spent fuel rods together, and you get a pile as big as a football field and more than 20 feet tall.
Or you could put them in a pile as big as 2 football fields and 10 feet tall, or half a football field and 40 feet tall, or 20 football fields 1 foot tall. The point is, we have a lot of nuclear waste, and it's very fun to play with. And look, that is just the waste from nuclear energy. We also have more than 100 million gallons of hazardous liquid waste from producing weapons. And you may live closer to nuclear waste than you think. 1 out of 3 Americans live within 50 miles of high-level nuclear waste, some of which, like plutonium, is lethally dangerous and will be around for an incredibly long time.
Even microscopic amounts of plutonium, if ingested, are deadly.
One of the characteristics of it is it has an extremely long half-life. Plutonium-239, for example, has a half-life of about 24,000 years.
It's true, 24,000 years, and that just scratches the surface. It takes 10 half-lives for plutonium to become harmless. So that's 240,000 years, a unit of time more commonly known as 1 English patient. And as any adult with an American Girl doll collection eventually finds out, if you want to keep something around for a disturbingly long time, you have got to find an appropriate place to put it. I cannot live with your murder dolls anymore. Felicity stares at me while I sleep. She stares at me. She stares unblinking. And look, I'm not the first person to make this point. Look at this news report from 1990.
Almost half a century after nuclear power was harnessed, there still is no agreement on where to store the waste. We have built the house, said one critic, and forgotten the toilets.
A home with no toilets, or as a realtor selling a Brooklyn loft is calling it right now, artisanal composting. Wait, you're suggesting that I shit in that potted plant? Well, you and I both know that I will do that, because this is convenient to public transport and has both northern and eastern exposures. Look, it has been 27 years since that clip, and our country still doesn't have a nuclear toilet. And that is our subject tonight. Why do we not have a nuclear toilet? And it's actually easy to understand how we got into this situation, because during World War II, we rushed to develop nuclear weapons because we were trying to defeat the Nazis, who, fun fact, pretty much all Americans agreed were bad at the time. Anyway, the thing is, we didn't really have a plan for what to do with all the radioactive byproducts that we produce, and this initially led us to some mind-blowingly stupid solutions. For instance, for years, we actually did this.
They loaded the radioactive waste, and it was in barrels, 55-gallon barrels of radioactive waste with concrete poured over it.
It's funny, the ocean don't glow out there outside of Red Bank, New Jersey. Really, because we dumped a lot of barrels out there.
That is true. We didn't just dump barrels of radioactive waste in the ocean. We did it off the coast of New Jersey. That is so horrifying. I am surprised that Jersey Shore was the title of a light-hearted MTV series and not the name of a harrowing documentary. An entire generation of children was born without thumbs, a phenomenon known to locals as the situation. And incidentally, not all of those barrels sank. In fact, in 1957, when 2 barrels were caught floating off the shore, naval aircraft were summoned to strafe them with machine gun fire until they sank. That's right, they shot barrels full of nuclear waste with machine guns. That has got to be one of the most terrifying sentences ever said out loud, right after Donald Trump is the president now, and wait, wasn't Felicity on a different shelf when we went to bed last night? Oh my God, Felicity is a waking nightmare! Although the truth is, tossing barrelfuls of nuclear waste into the ocean and shooting them with machine guns is actually preferable to at least one genuine other idea that was thankfully rejected, and that was blasting it into space. A concept with a pretty clear flaw.
Unfortunately, we don't have a great record with getting rockets out into the atmosphere. If any one of them blew up, that would basically contaminate a large portion of the Earth with radioactive material. So that's probably not a great idea.
Yeah, you're right. That's probably not a great idea. I mean, a really great idea would be also filling the rockets up with confetti, so at least that way, if there's a horrific accident, there's also a party. Now, over the years, we have dumped nuclear waste all over the country, and in many places there have been frightening leaks. Take the Savannah River site in South Carolina, where waste from poorly stored material leaked into the groundwater. And just watch this alarmingly laid-back man explain the consequences of that.
There are radioactive alligators on the site. Radioactive materials are in the sediments. It's going to go up the food chain, and there's going to be radioactive alligators.
Yeah, radioactive alligators. They even have names, Tritogator and Dioxinator, after two of the wastes that poisoned them. And that's actually very clever, because if I had to give them names, I don't know, I'd probably have gone with something like, oh, holy shit, a fucking radioactive alligator! And, oh no, fuck me, there's another one! What nightmare hath God wrought? And it's not just reptiles who've been impacted by nuclear waste. Researchers are now studying an area in North St. Louis County, Missouri, where tons of waste from the Manhattan Project was improperly stored, some near a creek that winds through residential communities. And people who live there have noticed some alarming trends.
I got on Facebook in order to reconnect with people in high school, and we all immediately started noticing that so many of us were sick. We discovered that the Department of Veterans Affairs officially recognizes around 21 cancers associated with exposure to ionizing radiation, and compared that list to what we had all of those cancers, every single one.
That is an incredibly depressing thing to discover on Facebook, and it's hard to know how to respond. I mean, you definitely don't want to use the like button, because then it looks like you really like the fact they just got cancer. Now there is that new sad emoji, which would really be perfect if you hadn't already cheapened it by using to respond to the news that Chris Pratt and Anna Forrest were separating. I mean, it is sad, but it's not 21 cancer sad. It's 9 cancer sad, tops. The point is, thankfully, 60 years ago, our government and the scientific consensus came up with a solution. In 1957, the National Academy of Sciences issued a report urging the creation of a permanent storage facility deep underground, basically a nuclear toilet. And while we did build a repository for lower-level waste in New Mexico, we still haven't built one for the most dangerous high-level waste. And as a result, it's essentially been left wherever it was made, which is not good, because those facilities were not built with the idea that they would be storing waste indefinitely. So to continue the toilet metaphor, we've basically been shitting in bags, leaving them all over the house, and praying that they don't leak. And the most frightening example of this is the Hanford site in Washington state, which created 2/3 of the plutonium in the US arsenal and is currently storing 56 million gallons of highly toxic and radioactive waste underground. And over the years, there have been so many issues at Hanford that they've achieved a dubious honor, as one local news station reported, with an almost prideful tone.
The most contaminated place in the entire Western Hemisphere isn't at a polluting factory or an old chemical plant. It's right here in Washington state.
Oh, it's right here. We did it, guys. Washington state, home to the most contaminated place in the Western Hemisphere, thousands of acres of apple orchards, and several of Ted Bundy's grisliest murders. We did it, right here. There have been a string of problems at Hanford, from explosions to toxic vapor releases to over 1 million gallons of waste leaking out of their tanks over the years. It has been so bad, the government has had to pay out nearly $1.5 billion in compensation to thousands of workers for illnesses stemming from exposure to radiation and toxic chemicals there. A local news station has done a series of reports on Hanford, and after a tunnel collapsed this May, they found some of the infrastructure there is almost comically badly put together.
Mistakes during construction are factors in the dangerous state of the tunnels. They're 55 and 60 years old, well beyond their expected lifespan. In addition, wood beams holding up the tunnels are eroding. And what corrodes timber beams? Radiation.
Yeah, you can't build something out of wood and expect it to last forever. You're supposed to have learned that from the second dumbest of the 3 little pigs. Hanford is a gigantic problem, and even though it hasn't produced anything for 30 years, the Department of Energy still spends nearly $2.5 billion a year on cleaning it up, which is close to 10% of its annual budget. And it is pretty weird to find out that a place you just heard about is getting that much of the DOE's money. It's like finding out that half the Department of Agriculture budget goes to this moose named Gordon. I mean, I don't know the right amount, but that seems like a lot. And in case you're thinking, well, I'm definitely glad that I don't live near Hanford, remember, there are nuclear power plants storing waste all over the country, lots of it in so-called spent fuel pools. That's where nuclear fuel rods are supposed to be temporarily placed to cool down and then put into dry containers and then moved to permanent underground storage sites. But remember, we don't have one of those. And in many places, those pools are just accumulating more and more rods. And while experts say it's highly unlikely, if a Fukushima-like accident happens at one of those, the results could be catastrophic.
The Northeast has a number of nuclear power plants, including the Indian Point plant just outside of New York City. If any one of those were to have a severe spent fuel pool accident, you're taking away a lot of big cities, a lot of farmlands, a lot of the United States for decades, perhaps centuries.
That's right, lots of big cities. New York, Hartford, Boston, and that last one is a real shame because, as I understand it, they only just got unracist yesterday. So, I mean, at least they could get to enjoy their new life. So look, it is pretty clear we need to find a permanent facility to store our most dangerous waste. And 30 years ago, we actually settled on a site, Yucca Mountain in Nevada. Congress passed a law designating it as our sole candidate for waste storage. Now, since then, we've spent $15 billion prepping the site, as you can see from this rather upbeat video.
Located about 100 miles northwest of Las Vegas, Yucca Mountain is the most thoroughly researched site of its kind in the world. Experts throughout the world agree that the most feasible and safe method for disposing of highly radioactive materials is to store them deep underground.
That's right. The best place to put nuclear waste is in a hole deep underground, much like Felicity. Wait, if she's not there, where is she? Oh, Jesus fucking Christ! Fuck me! Jesus fucking get the fuck out of here! It's all right, it's okay. I'm fine. It's fine. The point is, so Yucca Mountain is our permanent storage site. So the problem is solved, right? Well, no. Because while the site has been deemed safe and the people in the immediate area, Nye County, actually support the project, many Nevadans elsewhere in the state really don't want it. And their former Senator, Harry Reid, lobbied hard, eventually managing to get Yucca shut down. Now, to be fair, he did have an alternative plan for all the states sitting on their nuclear waste, but to put it mildly, it was not exactly scientifically sound.
Leave it on site, where it is. Leave it where it is. And dry cast storage containers. If you were smart, what you would do is leave it where it is.
If you're smart, what you would do is leave the thing where it is terrible advice for dealing with nuclear waste, although it is coincidentally the title of Britain's best-selling book on parenting. But here is the truth. The scientific consensus for decades has been that leaving it where it is a really bad idea. The shuttered power plant at San Onofre in California is storing nuclear waste, and it's on a fault line right next to the ocean. And that sounds like something you learn in the first scene of a movie starring The Rock that you watch on a plane. And look, maybe Yucca is the best place to store our growing supply of radioactive garbage. Maybe it's not. I am not a nuclear scientist, I just have the face of one. And our new energy secretary, Rick Perry, yes, Rick Perry, has said that he is optimistic about fixing the whole problem, which does sound great, although he didn't exactly do a great job at dealing with this disaster. Yeah, that was him on Dancing with the Stars, and on the basis of that, managing volatile energy is not really his forte. But here's the thing, we've been saying that we are going to fix this for decades now, and we seem to be no closer to a solution. And let me show you something that really drove that fact home to us, because we've been researching this story for a couple of weeks now, and just yesterday afternoon, we stumbled on a TV special from 1977, the year that I was born.
NBC News presents Danger, radioactive waste.
Yeah, this problem is so old, they reported on it back when the news was kept in an America-shaped vault that you had to open with a crank. And as we watched that yesterday, we gradually and chillingly realised that by pure coincidence, it hits every beat of the story that we just told you. It opens with footage of sailors throwing barrels into the ocean. It looks at the facilities at Hanford. It talks about radiation's impact on workers and on families who live nearby. And while it doesn't have a radioactive alligator, it does have radioactive cows, which is still good, although I did prefer our alligator. I liked it when he went... But the most chilling moment in that documentary might be the one where they sit down with someone in authority and demand to know exactly when this will be fixed.
When you ask when the problem will be solved, you get answers like this.
What's the realistic timetable?
Repository in operation in 1985. Other sites by the end of 1978 for detailed work.
Exactly. Nuclear waste is a problem we were supposed to have dealt with in the 1980s and still cannot solve, much like this Rubik's Cube that I always carry with me. You are my Jean Valjean cube, and one day I shall defeat you. And at the end of that special, remember, 40 years ago, the correspondent delivers this special message.
The waste increases every minute. The solution of where to put it is years away, and none of the previous solutions has worked. We are accustomed in this country to act only in times of crisis. But with nuclear waste, when the crisis comes, it will be too late.
And that was from 4 decades ago. We have already waited way too long to resolve this issue, and we are dancing with trouble here. So if anyone says the government can just continue to wait, they are, much like a house with no toilet, absolutely full of shit. lead, the most dangerous thing in Led Zeppelin's name, and I will remind you, the other thing was Zeppelin. Now, we've heard a lot about lead over the last year due to the horrific events in Flint, Michigan.
Flint's tap water was laced with dangerous levels of lead. The state knew about it and did nothing.
There are 200 children under the age of 6 in Flint with elevated blood levels. 9,000 children have been exposed.
Yes, Flint has become a city whose very name evokes disaster, like Benghazi or Waco or Smurf Village. Never forget. Never forget what happened there. Never forget. Flint was a perfect storm of incompetence from start to finish, and the crisis began when the city switched water sources, a decision which was commemorated thusly.
3, 2, 1.
Here's the plant.
It's a little weird to see people make a toast as they essentially drink poison. Because under those circumstances, you'd usually expect to hear something like, "I'll see you all in hell," or "The mothership is coming and soon we will all ascend." That new water system eroded the city's pipes and leached lead into the drinking water. And with all the bureaucratic clusterfuckery involved, politicians in Washington were lining up to be vocally outraged.
We've got children that have been harmed, and yet we're sitting here equivocating over words that may or may not establish blame.
The safety and well-being of our citizens is not a Republican or a Democrat or an independent issue. It's a human issue.
We're not some third world country where you get 100,000 people who get poisoned for long periods of time.
That's right, because there is only one poison that thousands of Americans should consume, and that is Mountain Dew Code Red. Code Red, the most delicious way of contracting red poisoning. That is horrific. So, we all care about lead in Flint now, which is great. Unfortunately, the problem is not just in Flint. A USA Today network report found lead contamination in almost 2,000 additional water systems spanning all 50 states. And we can't just act like it's not there, the way we all pretend that the public swimming pool is not 3% child urine. And that's generous, by the way. And if you're thinking, well, we should just rip out every lead pipe in the country, it's not quite as easy as that. There are an estimated 7.3 million lead service lines around the country, and we don't even know where many of them are. And if we did a partial solution, that could increase rather than decrease lead in water. But perhaps more importantly, even if we did replace all lead pipes, that still wouldn't come close to stopping lead poisoning, as one lead activist reassuringly puts it.
Kids are not going to get poisoned from a water fountain at their school. They're not. They're going to get poisoned from paint in their homes.
Okay. I like how that starts off sounding reassuring, but ends up even more terrifying. It's like saying, look, that boa constrictor isn't going to bite you. It's not. It's just not. It's going to crush you to death with its body and then swallow you whole, because that's what it does. But she is right. The biggest threat of lead poisoning to children does not come from water. It comes from ingesting lead paint dust. There are an estimated 2.1 million homes all around the country that contain both a lead dust hazard and a child under 6. And the CDC estimates over 500,000 children have elevated blood lead levels, and that's terrible. Lead is almost as much of a scourge in young children's homes as frozen merchandise. Why do you need 3 Olafs and a singing Elsa, Mackenzie? Let it go, go. Hashtag let it go, go. And if you're thinking at this point, well, how big a deal is a little lead dust anyway? It's a big f***ing deal.
How potent is lead? A child can be poisoned by only 10 milligrams of pure lead. To give you an idea of what a small amount that is, this spoonful contains about 4,000 milligrams. Today, we know just ingesting small amounts of lead dust can lead to brain damage and even death.
Okay, but first, maybe don't say death in that jolly tone of voice over the photo of a baby, but second, it is true that there is no safe level of lead. It's one of those things so dangerous you shouldn't even let a little bit of it inside you, much like heroin or Jeremy Piven. Even low-level exposure can lead to irreversible damage like lower IQs, antisocial behaviour and reduced attention span. And the dangers are so severe that 20 years ago, Sesame Street even produced a video to teach kids how to deal with lead in their homes.
Let's go, everybody! From the top! Wash your hands before you eat! Wash your hands before you eat! Stay away from peeling paint! Stay away from peeling paint!
Enough! I've had it! Who do you people think you are, anyway? The lead police? We are the lead police. We are the lead police.
It's a close call, but as police songs go, the possibility of being poisoned by lead is still less terrifying than every breath you take. Every breath I take, you'll be watching me? That's a crime. You're stalking me, Gordon. You're a stalker. That video was made 20 years ago, and it's enough to make you wonder, well, if lead paint is so dangerous, why the is there still so much of it in houses where kids live? And that's a good question. Many countries around the world actually banned the use of lead paint in the 1920s, so we knew it was dangerous. But instead of joining them, America decided to put lead basically everywhere.
Humble lead also plays its part in preserving and protecting old and new buildings in the form of white lead for wooden structures and red lead for steel.
Wait, humble lead? It's a naturally occurring element, not Meryl Streep's Oscar speech. And also, if we're assigning personality traits to metals, why stop with humble lead? How about passionate zinc, free-spirited copper, and extremely racist tin? And it wasn't just newsreels promoting lead. The lead industry reassured us it was safe, releasing things like this colouring book inviting you to the Dutch Boys Lead Party, which sounds like the worst sex club in all of Amsterdam. And even when the government finally got serious about banning lead in the 70s and 80s, the lead industry did not go down without a ridiculous fight. Here is the head of a lead industry trade group pushing back against the evidence that lead was dangerous.
The fact of the matter is, if you look at a total national profile, we have never been healthier. We have never lived longer. There must be something that we're doing right.
What? He's basically saying it can't be bad, I turned out fine, which is the #1 argument made by people who did not turn out fine. It's like when your uncle says, hey, I had my first beer at 10 and I turned out okay, but did you, Uncle Stu? Did you, though? Because your dinner last night was 23 croutons dipped in frosting, and that is not turned out fine behaviour. Make a change, Uncle. And by the way, there was already plenty of hard evidence showing that childhood lead exposure was harmful, due in large part to a study by this man, Dr. Herbert Needleman.
In the late 1970s, Dr. Needleman studied the baby teeth of healthy school children in 2 Boston suburbs.
When we looked at the data, we found that children who had high lead in their teeth, but who had never been identified as having any problems with lead, had lower IQ scores, poor language function, and poor attention.
That's right. It's time you knew, children. There is no tooth fairy. Your baby teeth were all taken away by Dr. Herbert Needleman. We told you the fairy thing because we knew that would creep you out. But you should be thanking that man, because thanks to studies like his, America started regulating and removing lead from our environment in the 1970s, resulting in a graph of child blood lead levels in this country that looks like this. Now, lead paint was banned here, and leaded gasoline was phased out all through here. So getting rid of lead in paint and gas was a major public health victory. You know that 18-year-old intern in your office who thinks he's so damn smart? Well, he probably is, because he was born after America's lead epidemic. You got lucky, Sawyer. Now go get my coffee. But even though we drastically cut back on the amount of new lead that we put into the world, we were still left with all the lead that was already there in our pipes and on our walls. And while we all agreed it was a problem, the cost of getting rid of it all was surprisingly high. In 2000, the estimated cost for testing for and then totally removing lead from old housing stock nationwide was $16.6 billion per year, every year, for the next decade, which is the sort of figure that turns the government into parents with a sick family dog. Hey, I know we said we'd do anything to make this better, But we just got an estimate from the vet, and do you know that in doggy heaven, every meal is hot dogs? Don't you think Bandit would like to go live there? I do. And look, nobody expected the government to pick up that full tab. That same report even ran an estimate of what it would cost if the government used interim controls, like sealing lead paint in or periodic cleanings, and only did that in homes where families with low incomes lived. And that cost came out to just $230 million per year, which sounded lower and therefore better. Unfortunately, and amazingly, we have never funded it at that level. For instance, the main program to abate lead paint in housing, HUD's Lead Hazard Control Program, has never been appropriated funding above $176 million. It's been steadily going down since 2003, and this year we've allocated just $110 million. That is just a little more than Americans spent to go see Ride Along 2. A movie which, incidentally, the New York Post described as funny as lead poisoning. And it's amazing. And look, that reduction is by no means because we were done removing lead from housing, because remember, there are still millions of homes with lead paint hazards in them. And according to HUD, they were only able to fund around half the applications for lead abatement grants they received last year, meaning many Americans still live in homes with lead in them, and sadly, it is often the groups least able to do anything about it.
When people in the lower socioeconomic levels go into older housing, less well taken care of housing where there may be absentee landlords, and as a result are more liable to have lead paint that has not been abated, has not been taken off the walls.
Of course, and if you're in that situation, you probably can't shop around for a new apartment. So most people with lead problems are stuck in homes they can't leave, trying their best to avoid danger, which may sound familiar because it's the plot of every fucking horror movie ever made. And the crazy thing is, while lead abatement is expensive, it's cost effective. For instance, some studies show a correlation between decreasing lead levels and a fall in crime. And when you combine that with lower medical bills and greater economic activity, one study found that each dollar spent on lead paint hazard control would bring back at least $17 in societal benefits, which is great. Although the cost savings still do rank a distant third on my list of reasons to not poison children. Number 1 and 2 still being it's poison and they're f***ing children. And you would think that our members of Congress would be on board with doing more to fight lead poisoning. After all, you remember how angry they were about all those kids who got poisoned in Flint, right?
We've got children that have been harmed.
It's a human issue. It's an American issue that affects Americans' lives.
We're not some third world country where you get 100,000 people who get poisoned.
They seem so concerned. Concerned? Which is what makes it, but that's what makes it so frustrating that last year, all of those men voted for a bill that would have reduced the already low funding for HUD lead abatement programs by $35 million, amounting to a 32% cut. And the truth is, if you cut funding like that, a whole lot more children might get poisoned. Poisoned? Now, the good news is, those cuts didn't go through. The bad news is the funding stayed flat. And by the way, the other two primary agencies that work on lead-related issues have had funding problems in recent years as well, which makes no sense, because I thought poisoned children was something we were all justifiably outraged by. This problem was obvious enough 20 years ago for Sesame Street to feel the need to address it. And since we very much still have this problem, it's clearly time to address it again. Hi, Elmo. Hi, Rosita.
Oh, hi, Mr. Oliver.
I can't believe that it has been 2 decades since Sesame Street taught kids how to avoid lead dust. You two do not look like you've aged a day.
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Oliver. I moisturize.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
You know, Mr. Oliver, Elmo's been hitting the gym.
Whoa there. Wow, I can see. You're ripped. Well, you both look great, but unfortunately, I'm here to say a lot of places still contain lead paint.
Oh, no. What can we do about that, Mr. Oliver?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, we need to care more than we currently do so that we spend enough money on containing it.
Oh, well, Elmo has some money in his piggy bank.
Oh, that's nice. Well, how much?
Thank you.
How much have you got in there, Elmo? How much is it?
$1.76.
Okay, that's a start.
Oh, yeah! Elmo did it! Elmo saved
No,
the
you didn't do
day!
it. No, Elmo, you didn't actually do it because we're going to need a lot more of that money. Probably hundreds of millions of dollars every year.
Ay, mama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
100 million is a big number.
Sure.
Oh, come on, everybody. Let's count to 100 million together. 1, 2, 3, 4,
No,
5,
guys,
6, 7,
we really do not have time for that. The problem here is people are worried that lead is too expensive a problem to fix.
That's ridiculous.
Oh, hey, Oscar, how you doing, Oscar?
Yeah. How can anyone say it's too expensive, huh? Aren't they aware that according to a study in environmental health perspectives, every dollar we spend on lead paint hazard control produces returns of at least 17 to 1?
Wow. That is an astonishing level of economic insight coming from someone who lives in a trash can.
Hey, this can is rent controlled. I've had it since the 60s.
Oh, okay. But Oscar, look, I know it's cost effective, but people just aren't willing to do it. I guess it just seems too hard.
Well, yeah, but just because something's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Hey, should we sing a song about it?
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
La la la. Lead's a really big problem. Seems like it's everywhere. We can do more to fix it, but first we all have to care.
Well, that does make sense, Elmo. Things do tend to get done if you just decide you want to do them. Can you think of another example where that's true?
Oh, I can.
You go.
I wanted to tie my shoes. I could never do it right. Then I decided to practice it, and now they're all knotted tight.
They are! You see, you just have to have a vested interest in the outcome and you'd be amazed at what you can do. Oscar, you take a verse.
Guess my trash can is messy. People stop and they stare. I suppose I could clean it up. The problem is I don't care.
Well, that is unsurprisingly negative, Oscar, but you know what? That's actually a fair representation of our institutional problems. So, there you go.
You mean I helped you prove your point?
Yes, Oscar, you actually did. Lead is still all around us, our pipes, our walls, and our air. We should do more to contain it, but first we all have to care. Yes, first we all have to care. That's our show. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week. Good night. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Rosita. Thank you so much. third most annoying thing in the sky after mosquitoes and plastic bags caught in the breeze. They are not gorgeous, weird kid from American Beauty. They're trash, and they kill sea turtles. You got turtle blood on your hands. But all of a sudden, drones are everywhere. We even use them to shoot romantic wedding videos. And what could possibly go wrong with that? He's fine. He's fine. He's probably fine. I don't know if he's fine. It's funny whether he's fine or not. But look, overseas, drones are a slightly more serious matter. For instance, this week, we reportedly launched deadly drone strikes in both Waziristan and Yemen. You probably didn't hear about them on the news unless you were watching this.
The U.S. has carried out another drone attack in Pakistan's restive tribal areas, killing at least 8 people.
That's the only footage reporting either strike that we could find, and it's from the Iranian government's English language TV station. That channel is buried deep in your cable package. I think it's actually somewhere between C-SPAN Junior and CAN, the Kirstie Alley network. But there is something strange about the fact that we launched deadly drone strikes in 2 sovereign nations that almost no one here heard about. But then again, why would it make the news? We use drones all the time. Hard numbers are very difficult to come by for reasons that we'll get into. But by one estimate, during the Obama administration, we've launched 8 times the number of drone strikes than we did under his predecessor. And while they've declined a bit recently, drone strikes will be as much a characteristic of the Obama presidency as Obamacare or receiving racist email forwards from distant relatives. And it's easy to see why drones are so popular. They cost less than manned planes and they kill a lot of terrorists. Their slogan should really be appealingly cheap and incredibly deadly, but unfortunately that's already been taken by Hardys. And they're not just popular with the White House. Surveys consistently show a majority of Americans approve of our use of drone strikes to fight extremists abroad. In fact, we're so comfortable with them. Nobody blinked an eye when the president said this.
The Jonas brothers are here. They're out there somewhere. Sasha and Malia are huge fans. But boys don't get any ideas. I have 2 words for you. Predator clones. You will never see it coming.
You'll lie there, your aorta's riddled with shrapnel fired from the sky, gurgling your last blood-soaked breath. It's funny because it's possible. I could do that. That's something I could do. But while our drone program is widely accepted, we really know relatively little about it. We spent a lot of time this week trying to find some concrete answers to basic questions, and it's surprisingly difficult. For instance, how do we decide when to use a drone strike? Now, on the surface, the Obama administration's answer seems straightforward.
We only take these kinds of actions when there's an imminent threat, when capture is not feasible, and when we are confident that we're doing so in a way that's consistent with federal and international law.
Okay, that sounds reassuring until you look closer at it. Because our rules for drone strikes are a little like Harvey Keitel's balls. We've all seen them in The Piano, Bad Lieutenant, or on Snapchat. And from a distance, you think, well, I understand the contours of those. But if you were to really examine them, you discover that they're actually lost in a haze of fuzziness and grey areas. Much like the rules for our drone strikes. As Eric Holder just said, drone strikes are justified if you can show an imminent threat. Now, that sounds clear. There's not much of a linguistic loophole there, unless you make one.
NBC News has obtained this confidential 16-page Justice Department memo. It says an imminent threat does not require the United States to have clear evidence that a specific attack on U.S. persons and interests will take place in the immediate future.
But an imminent threat does have to take place in the immediate future because that's what the f***ing word imminent means. When someone says, I'm going to have a baby imminently, it doesn't mean I may or may not have a baby at some point in the future. It means, get your f***ing car keys, my water just broke. And it turns out imminent isn't the only word with a surprisingly fluid definition when it comes to drone strikes. What defines a civilian when it comes to civilian casualties has also allegedly been open to interpretation.
there's also been some dispute over the way civilian casualties are counted. The CIA often counts able-bodied males, military-age males who are killed in strikes as militants unless they have concrete evidence to sort of prove them innocent.
Hold on. If it's assumed you're with the terrorists, if you're in the same vicinity and around the same age as them, then by that standard, as a British man in my 30s, whenever I go home to London, I'm a member of Coldplay. And that's offensive to me. That's offensive. I've not been in that band for years. We consciously uncoupled a long time ago. Perhaps the most incredible thing about our drone program, which again, a majority of us support, is not how little we know about who the government is killing, but how little they themselves seem to know.
NBC News has examined classified documents detailing 114 drone strikes. They also reveal what U.S. officials don't know, like how many killed. Between 7 and 10 in one strike, 20 to 22 in another. It suggests U.S. officials don't always know exactly how many or who they're killing.
That is a little disturbing, because the question, how many people have you killed in drone strikes, is not one of those questions where it's okay to say, I don't know. It's not like asking someone who was the voice of Disney's Aladdin or what are Skittles made from. It's different. It's different than that. And the crazy thing is, it has literally always been like this. The very first CIA drone strike back in 2002 killed 3 men, reportedly because they thought one of them might have been bin Laden, in part, and this is true, due to his height. And under that rationale, it's kind of remarkable that we didn't take out Jeff Goldblum at some point over the years. Now, reports later indicated the victim was actually an innocent man who was collecting scrap metal. And look how the Pentagon immediately set the template for every discussion we've had about drone strikes since.
You said you don't know who was killed in this attack, whether it's civilians, Taliban, or...
No, I'm sorry.
We don't know exactly who it was.
We don't know the identities of the individuals involved.
But you're convinced they're Taliban?
We're convinced it was an appropriate target. Based on the observation, based on the information that it was an appropriate target. We do not know yet exactly who it was.
It's never a good idea to make a major decision about someone when you can't even say exactly who they are. Hey, guys, I got married last night. Oh, really? Who is he? I don't know exactly at this time, but I'm convinced he's an appropriate husband based on his height. And yet, we have consistently let the government get away with answers like that, because drone strikes are one of those things that it's really convenient not to think about that much. Like the daily life of a circus elephant, or the fact that Beck is a Scientologist. You really don't want people reminding you about those kind of things. But if you happen to live underneath drones, not thinking about them is not an option. Having drones hovering above you is bound to mess with your head, especially because you might not even be able to see them.
Even though I know there's a predator directly overhead, I still can't hear a thing. And if you look up to the exact spot where we're being told the predator is flying right now, there's nothing but clouds and blue sky.
Congratulations, everyone. We did it. We managed to make one of the last remaining universal symbols of pleasantness, blue sky, completely fucking terrifying. We did it. Woo! And look, while we may not spend much time thinking about our drone strikes here, in countries like Pakistan, where they actually happen, they have to deal with them so much. There are even weird satirical cartoons featuring an American drone and his friend, a dengue fever-carrying mosquito.
अच्छा चल छोड़ इन बातों को ये बता तुझे पाकिस्तान कैसा लगता है कैसा लगता है अरे मैंने तो पूरा खानदान ही यहाँ बुलवा लिया है तो यहाँ की हुकूमत ने तुम्हारे खिलाफ कुछ किया अभी तक तो सिर्फ बयान दिया है मैं भी कई सालों से यही सुन रहा हूँ इसीलिए तो हम पाकिस्तान में मौज कर रहे हैं
To be fair, that would be a lot funnier if you spoke Urdu and lived in constant fear of being murdered by a drone. If you did, that's basically who's on first. In fact, drone strikes are such a routine feature of life in Pakistan. This is how news networks present statistics about them.
पाकिस्तानी हुकूमत की मर्जी से कर रहा है जवाब में 41% अफराद ने इसराइल से इत्तेफाक किया और कहा कि अमेरिका
Drones have their own graphics package. You do not invest in top quality graphics like those unless you know you're going to get a lot of use out of them. It's like Las Vegas local news having white tiger mauling graphics. They're going to get their money's worth. But to really understand the psychological impact of living underneath drones, listen to this Yemeni man who loves America, addressing Congress last year, only a week after his village was struck by a drone.
I spent a year living with an American family and attended an American high school. That was one of the best years of my life. The friendships and values I experienced and described to the villagers helped them understand the America that I know and that I love. Now, however, when they think of America, they think of the terror they feel from the drones that hover over their heads, ready to fire missiles at any time. The drone strikes are the face of America to many Yemenis.
And that kind of makes sense. Because think about it this way. If there were Italian armed drones hanging over your head right now, it would probably affect the way you think about Italy. In word association, your first answer for Italy would not be lasagna, it would be spectre of imminent death, or more likely, spectre of the imminent death, followed by lasagna. But if you grow up underneath drones, it's going to affect the way you see the world. Listen to this 13-year-old Pakistani boy whose grandmother was killed in a drone strike.
I no longer love blue skies. In fact, I now prefer gray skies. The drones do not fly when the skies are gray, and for a short period of time, the mental tension and fear eases.
Look, it is completely natural for us not to want to think about the consequences of our drone program. But when children from other countries are telling us that we've made them fear the sky, it might be time to ask some hard questions. The problem is, after a week of looking at this, it seems there are shockingly few available answers. In fact, the best summation we could find of the framework we use to authorize and justify drone strikes is from this former Defense Department advisor.
Right now, we have the executive branch making a claim that it has the right to kill anyone, anywhere on Earth, at any time, for secret reasons based on secret evidence in a secret process undertaken by unidentified officials. That frightens me.
Yeah, it probably does frighten you, because what you just described sounds fucking terrifying. And look, any counter-terrorism effort will always require an element of secrecy. But with our drone program, not only do we not know who we've killed, the legal guidelines have loopholes large enough to drive a flying death robot through. And after a week spent trying to comprehend the rationales, legality, and broader consequences of our drone policy, I am starting to understand how this guide feels. Exactly. Main story tonight is income inequality. A good way to figure out which side of it you're on is whether you're currently paying for HBO or stealing it. Last December, some of you laughed a little too hard at that. Last December, the president made it clear that income inequality was going to be a big priority.
The combined trends of increased inequality and decreasing mobility pose a fundamental threat to the American dream, our way of life, and what we stand for around the globe. I believe this is the defining challenge of our time.
Yes, the defining challenge of our time. Well, one of the two defining challenges of our time, the other being Candy Crush level 97. That is hard. I've got a lollipop hammer and I still can't. The point is that the president said the word inequality 26 times in that speech, which everyone took to mean one thing.
Income inequality is going to be the thrust, one of the major themes in 2016.
Members of the Senate Democratic leadership team, that's Harry Reid on down, are clearly going after this income inequality issue.
For Democrats, it's an all-out assault on the issue of income inequality.
An all-out assault. You better watch your ass, income inequality, because you're about to get violently ameliorated. Or you would have been if they hadn't almost immediately backed down.
A new article says President Obama appears to be shifting strategy on tackling income inequality. The Washington Post reveals Democrats are split on the issue, leading President Obama to shift talk away from the subject.
So basically, income inequality has become just another topic of conversation we prefer to avoid in America, like Japanese internment camps or that time that we gave Roberto Benigni an Academy Award. You know, national tragedies, equally wrong. There is a key reason why no politician wants to talk about it, and that's because every time someone tries to, this happens.
Is President Obama engaged in class warfare?
Class warfare.
Class warfare.
The politics of class warfare.
Trying to drive a class warfare argument. Use that hashtag class warfare.
Okay, that all sounds silly, but the phrase class warfare is so toxic, the president actually had to stop talking about the thing he describes as a fundamental threat to the American dream. And this was so predictable that 3 years ago, he actually gathered a group of historians and told them, what you could do for me is to help find a way to discuss the issue of inequality in our society without being accused of class warfare. To which they presumably said, yeah, we can't really help you with that, although we can tell you what Warren G. Harding named his penis. It's not what you're thinking. But just because politicians can't talk about income inequality doesn't mean we shouldn't. And before we do...